I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hi, Judy. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully today. Thank you, Matt, because I'm looking forward to our conversation, which, by the way, always cheers me.
Me too. And we've got an interesting show today. It's just going to be me and you. And we were talking before I hit the record button about an article written about you and kind of how the course came into the world I think 40 or 50 years ago in a magazine called New Realities, which is really kind of maybe your introduction and the course's introduction to the general public. But I found that the article, which I'll include in the show notes, was looks like it was written today in many ways. And in there, you described a revelatory experience, really, I guess is what we'll call it, when you were very young. And I thought maybe today you could tell us about that.
First of all, I'm very surprised you found New Realities. I always wished it was put online, and maybe it will be, because the person who was the publisher and who did the interview is James Bolin, still very much with us. And perhaps maybe someday he'll make it available for all of us. And you picked the reason that magazine was unique. It's still topical. Yeah. These subjects don't go away. We may have gone way past the research that was described then in the magazine in other articles, but we never have gone past the yearning and the interest to know more about who we are in truth and essence. So, thank you for finding the article and reminding me that it's still useful.
Definitely.
And so I would be glad to tell it to you. I don't think the details are going to change. But if they do, well, I was probably 44 when I told that story, and I'm 90 now. So maybe I'll forget some of it, but probably not. It was too strong. And you were right. I think I could consider it a revelatory experience. And why did I have it? Who knows why people have things, but they do have them. Not just I have them, but many, many other people all over the world in different forms at different ages, some often, some not so often, through all different means. Some people have it when they're sick and dying, and some people have them when they're on a drug, and some people have them in meditation, and some people have them in prayer, and some people have them in sleep, and some people have them just because they all of a sudden seem to happen. With me, it was because I believe it was because I was sent to dental surgery when I was 9 years old to remove 4 wisdom teeth, which had not yet descended and probably wouldn't have for another 10 years. I had a small mouth. I was a very small child. And the dentist was worried that as new teeth grew in, they would be terribly crowded and I might lose them. And the best thing to do, since you don't really need your wisdom teeth, is to take them out and give my mouth room to expand for the teeth that were yet to come in. So that's a pretty long explanation of why I went to the dentist at 9 years old to have dental surgery. And my mother took me. I adored my mother. She was a loving and gentle person, and I knew how deeply she cared for me, even when I was young. So we went to the dentist. I remember that I went from Brooklyn, New York, where I was brought up, on the train to Manhattan, where the big doctors were, the big boys played. And the surgery was done in his dental office, which was also a dental surgery office. And I had been told by my mother that what was going to happen to me, and they were going to put me to sleep. And when I woke up, it would all be over. And so my expectations were not a fear. I felt I would go to sleep, and when I woke up, it would all be over because she told me that. And I got in the dental chair. That part I remember. The next part was way, way out of anything I had ever experienced. I was 9 years old and I loved to read, but I certainly never read anything about that. I saw in my mind's eye uh, dots which had positioned themselves into a triangle. They weren't connected, they were like large black dots, very visible, against just sort of a neutral background. And I saw these dots as somewhat like an isosceles triangle, even though in those days I didn't take geometry. And I realized somehow or other in this other state of being that my consciousness, that which was the Judy part of me, was suspended along the bottom line of dots, which you could say was the base of the triangle. And very quickly after that, some kind of force that I didn't understand and couldn't even think about because it was so alarming and painful, I started to become compressed. And as my awareness became compressed, I felt a lot of pain. It was like the opposite of freedom. It was like a gravitational pull where I was getting compressed and going up the ladder of the triangle so that there were less dots and it was getting to be a closer and closer confined space until I got to the very top dot, which it seems I was so fearful of that in my being, I was trembling all over. And all of a sudden, there was this like shot of pain, more emotional pain than anything else, as I burst through the top dot and I was no more. I say I was no more because there was no perception. I didn't see anything. There was a vast field of forever, like eternity. All I knew was the feeling I felt was liberating, and that I felt so light, I was suspended, and that I felt so happy and so peaceful that there was no fear at all. And I felt such love that I couldn't possibly contain it. And so it was just coming out of my non being. And all that I felt was this incredible love and peace. And then before I knew it, I was lying in a recovery room. My mother was holding my hand, and my mouth was stuffed full of cotton, and I couldn't speak. And I lay there holding my mother's hand, and she was stroking me, feeling the love and the comfort of my mother, and yet remembering that I had just been through something that was even more loving and more comforting than I could ever imagine. And what could be more loving and comforting than my mother? Now, I was not a child philosopher, and I didn't think of these things deeply. This was more what I was feeling, but the feeling was so clearly impressed upon my beingness that I never forgot. And finally, when they took all the packing out of my mouth and I was able to speak, I was very anxious to tell my mother what happened. And I did tell her, probably in as not as much detail as I'm telling all of you and myself again. But I pretty much told her the whole story. And she looked at me kindly while stroking my hand. And she said, "Oh, darling, I'm so glad you had such a nice dream." In that moment, I recognized that I could not talk about this because there were no words. Years later, I learned the word ineffable means it can't be spoken about because we don't have the words. That's what that feeling was like. And so for years, I couldn't talk about it. But what I did notice is that it changed me in a slight way, which is what happened to me after that. I had sort of like a goal shift. I do not know how much 9-year-olds think about a goal. Maybe we think about a goal to be a good baseball player or a doctor or the very many different things that are open to us today. In those days, girls were girls and boys were boys, and they weren't not that much open to girls. But I didn't have a goal of what I wanted to someday become, like a ballerina, a nurse, a writer, a teacher. Those were the things that were popular for women to become. And I just knew that in a way, my goal was to get back to that, is to find that again. And so as I became older, 12, 13, 14 years, I looked for books that would talk about this kind of a feeling. And I started to find them in the field called the spiritual. I didn't find them so much in the religious books that I was given, and I was born Jewish and attended Hebrew school and was very carefully educated in my own religion. And there was a lot to learn. But I didn't find that feeling of limitless, unconditional love that I both was and I was part of, actually, until I came across A Course in Miracles when I was 44.
And did you get any kind of message or hear any voice or anything when you were in that state?
I'm glad you're reminding me. And I'm glad you read that article, because I left out what I think is the best part. Yes, Matt, I certainly did. It wasn't a message. It wasn't in 20 years from now, you will be doing such and such. No, it was a non-perceptual hearing. What I mean was, it wasn't a hearing like the ear is used as a tool to process vibrations, go to the brain, we hear. What I heard, felt, let's say heard, felt is the word. What I heard, felt was a voice that came from within and without all at once and all around. And it was, now you know, now you know, now you know. And of course, I didn't know what I knew, but I did know what I felt. And the now you know was an indication to me that I knew all. But a 9-year-old doesn't do much with that information, of course. But a 44-year-old in a deep spiritual search does a lot with it, like recognize it. So I would say this had a great bearing on my life's inner search, without even bringing it out to people in words, or very few people I spoke with about this, not even my teachers in school. Now you know. What does that mean? What do we know? Well, A Course in Miracles tells us, and our higher mind, our right mind, the part of our mind that is connected to our source or God, knows all.
Now, I'm sure there's listeners that are thinking, oh my gosh, I've never had kind of a revelatory experience. Does that mean I'm on the wrong track? And, it sounds like most people have the kind of slowly evolving curriculum. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I thought about that quite a lot. A lot of things over my lifetime that have happened to me have been of the, let's say, highly unusual variety. And I have always thought I must be so slow, like a mule, that I have to get hit over the head with a 2x4 to get my attention. I still think the same thing. No, we don't need experiences like that to change our lives. Of course not. The fact that I had it, I can't explain why. I do feel, from studying the Course 46 years now, I do feel that God's plan is in place for all of us equally. There isn't anyone left out. And that our inner plan is specifically geared to what we need to learn in order to achieve the remembrance of our identity, in order to strip away all the layers that lie between us and the knowledge of love as our inheritance. So it doesn't really matter whether you have a dream or an experience or you never have any of them at all. It only matters what your intention is and what it is you want to find out when it comes to the spiritual. Because as soon as you start even asking questions and being slightly willing to find out, your plan is an operation for you. And you're going to get it in the best way that you understand and will accept. Someone else may have had an experience such as mine when he or she was much older and dismissed the whole thing as poppycock. I was too young to do that. So I look back on why did I have this at 9 years old when I couldn't even use the words to describe it. I think sort of my plan was to catch me early. Had a lot of preparation to do before my assignment was clear to me. And I think we need to trust that our higher self, our inner teacher, our higher teacher, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, God, whatever we choose to call the divine, knows exactly what we need at any given time. And that is the reason why turning within and asking for help from that source is the best way for you to live your life.
You know, we were talking before we hit the record button that sometimes the world, especially with COVID and everything, seems like it can be bizarre at times and get weirder and weirder. And you had some good thoughts on that. Could you share a little bit?
Well, they're just thoughts, they're musings, I would say, because we like to entertain ourselves all the time. We know our mind is working all the time, constantly, yap, 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 yap. But which mind is it? Most all the time, it's the ego mind. And if we are of two minds, and I think, in talking to ourselves, it's a pretty good indication that whether we recognize it or think it or not, we are of two minds. Or else when we talk to ourselves, who do we think we're talking to? I've come to think that we are edging towards an awakening. When I first read in the course very early on, in the first edition, it was page 28. I remember it so well. Today's edition, I don't know what page it is, but you can easily search for it and find it on our web edition. And the quote goes something like this. And God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. And nowhere does it say in the Bible that he awakened. Now, I'm paraphrasing that. I'm not quoting it exactly, but you could easily find it out. God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and nowhere does it mention his awakening. That became to me some kind of a clue. If we all fell into a deep sleep, we're still in the deep sleep, and the deep sleep is what we call the ego or the ego mind. It's the sense that we have no control over our lives, although we try to all the time. And this world, which is so deficient in so many ways, was made through whatever our religious tradition tells us, but many religious traditions tell us that God made this world. Well, the Course says just the opposite. The Course said God did not make this world, you did. Wow. If God did not make this world, we did. No wonder it's so unsatisfying. But if we allow that God made only an extension of itself, which is spirit, which is us, which the Course calls altogether the Son of God, consciousness altogether, we are the collective Son of God. And we recognize that the attributes are love, light, peace. Wouldn't we rather live in that world than the world that we made? You start to ask those questions of yourself. Very scary at first, I think, to say you can plunge into a different world that you don't know. But I remember I was plunged into a different world. I can't say that that was what we call heaven or I can't say that that was what we're all going to experience. All I know, it was very much an indication of another way of being. And it's so far and infinitely superior to what I see going around me in the world of form. So I do think that what looks like a weirder and more out of control and unhappier and more dangerous society that we call humanity, living on a planet that we are soiling to such an extent that we don't know whether or not we can repair it, makes a lot of sense that we made ourselves, that we did it ourselves, that there's no deity or God that made this mess, that we did it. So how do we undo it? Well, for me, the only way to undo it is to ask for higher help. Because even in that, even though this is not our domain for eternity, higher help knows how to help us awaken from the dream. Awakening from the dream promises peace, inner peace. It promises a sanctuary that is all encompassing. It promises us equality since there are no differences. It promises us total and complete and unconditional love. And I think the longer people feel drawn to these ideas, and they may be drawn to them for a while and then say, I had enough, I'm going back, it's too hard, or I don't believe this anymore, or for whatever reasons. And we go back and forth and back and forth. But if you find that it's getting better and better for you, having these thoughts, living that domain, finding that the miracle is indeed the change in mind from fear to love, which we ourselves in our ego personification selves make, that we see there is a better way. Of course, the miracles came about because two people were searching for a better way and they agreed to do it together. It's as simple as that. That's where the Course came from. As soon as they said, we don't want to live this way anymore, there must be a better way of living and working in this world, and we're going to find it together, Helen started to hear or recognize or feel an inner voice which dictated the Course in its entirety. And Bill Thetford, as her co-scribe, was the one who actually asked the question, and the one who received the answer, and the one who used the Course to find his better way. And having known him for the middle to the latter part of his life and been with him when he died, I know he found it.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Well, Judy, that is an incredible story. And what recall you have from 9 to now 90 to deliver those details. That was very helpful. Any parting thoughts before we go?
I imagine when I'm parting, I'll have some parting thoughts for you. Right now, I don't feel as if I'm parting so quickly because I love too much what I'm doing.
Okay. Okay.
And that's something else too. I don't have many friends left who are my age, but I do have a lot of younger friends who think they're getting to be my age. And sooner or later, they probably will. But they are asking these questions earlier, certainly, than I did. Young people are coming in asking the same questions. Why? I believe because minds have joined, and therefore more and more and more and more of us asking the same questions and hoping, praying for the same guidance, touch minds yet even unborn. So we have a world that's being much more awakened to the concepts. And as you let yourself let go of the fear and be literally transformed by becoming the loving being that you wished you were and that you probably had seen in other people too, and you want more of yourself, you become that more and more and more. And so if there were a parting word for today,
yes.
I would say practice, 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 practice.
Great advice. Yeah, mine, for me, it's the distraction machine it's so hard to practice through, but do make a point of it. But there are so many reasons not to practice, but there is a benefit. There is a huge benefit to the daily lessons, to reading the course. I mean, as difficult as it appears to be sometimes, the struggle, sometimes it feels like you're pushing through this like membrane, and there's so much like resistance that it might not, is this worth it? What am I doing? But then, there's these moments where you say, oh my gosh, yes, this is definitely worth it. I'm on the right path here. I can feel the wind at my back.
Yes. I love that expression. You can feel the wind at your back. And what is that wind but spirit?
Yeah.
In fact, the Hebraic and Hebrew language, the Holy Spirit, the translation into Hebrew of the Holy Spirit is Ruach. Ruach is the first word, HaKadosh. Ruach means wind. Kadosh means holy. Spirit and wind, in this sense, are one, because Ruach is also the word for spirit wind. So to have that spirit wind at your back is a really good thing indeed. Huh. And when someone tells you, hey, I'll have your back, or I'll be the wind behind your back.
Yeah.
Or the wind beneath your wings. What we're talking about is a very deep spiritual principle.
Yeah. The wind beneath your wings reminds me of that song.
Exactly.
Would you mind singing it for us, Judy?
You are very funny, but I would love have it sung. So any of you who don't remember that song, go get it and listen to it and think of it in terms of not two people.
Yeah.
But spirit, your own, you, spirit, talking to yourself.
Well, wind beneath your wings. What a great theme to end on, Judy. Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."